Morning, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to our very first Survivor Circle session on Survivor Space. We're glad that you have joined us, and we just want to start by saying, with this being our first Survivor Circle session, please have patience with us if any of the technology glitches. We're learning as we go as well. But I'm very happy today to have Sarah Helms join us as our presenter. She's a clinical psychologist and a subject matter expert for Survivor Space. So on your screen on Survivor Space, you should see the live stream on the page. You can enlarge, you can click on it as the YouTube live stream, and you can enlarge it for the full screen if you prefer. Also on the Survivor Space page is a chat. You should be able to type in a question or a comment in the chat box if you would like at any time. Because this is new and we're testing everything out, we're going to have Sarah give her presentation first, and then when she is finished with her presentation, any questions that you've asked or comments that you would like to make, we will relay those to Sarah and she can respond at that time. But I think we will go ahead and Sarah, if you have your PowerPoint ready.
Yeah. Go ahead and see if I can share screen.
Perfect.
Great.
All
So
right.
hopefully everyone is seeing that like I am. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Helms. I'm a clinical psychologist based out of North Carolina. Just really excited and honored to be here today talking about the idea of healing in community. So that's going to be our focus for today. And there we go. So just briefly, our funding acknowledgement here. Survivor Space is part of the Zero Abuse Project and is funded with some grant monies. So just wanted to put that out there for everyone. So welcome. With this being our first Survivor Space, I thought it might be interesting to just pause and check in about not only the idea of community, but specifically the idea of Survivor Space and the community that we were hoping to create here today in this group. Obviously, we have a community of people joining from potentially all across the country or around the world, and potentially moving forward through Survivor Space, having those opportunities to build community there. So Survivor Space is a website, and eventually it's going to also be an app that has been designed by survivors for survivors to meet this need of really building community, of building a space where people can share information, resources, support, connection, just all of those key ingredients that we think are so important and that can sometimes be hard to access in our day-to-day life. I think community is important for all of us, but especially for survivors of childhood sexual abuse, because of the way that can impact survivors. So I just thank you for being here today, for showing up for yourselves, for each other, and just being present in this space today as we meet and try to build some community together. I just want to say, especially because aspects of this presentation and then conversation afterwards are going to involve community and conversation together, we really have the power to create this space very intentionally. So to define what this experience is like today in this little circle that we're building, and then how we carry the impact of that in our lives as we move on throughout the rest of our day or our week. We are going to be asking for folks to communicate in the chat. So if you would like to type comments or questions throughout, you can feel free to do that anonymously. There's no pressure to do that. Also, I just want to say if joining and watching and kind of absorbing information today is where you're at, that's awesome. That's perfect. There's no pressure to participate in any particular way. One of the great things about community, I think, is that we can all experience it differently. So everyone can kind of get their own needs met. Some people are internal processors. So for them, they may really get benefit from being present enjoying what's being discussed and kind of doing some work internally with taking that information in. Other people may be external processors where they really gain benefit from talking and participating in a more active or outgoing or verbal way. That's great too. But again, however the benefits of this community might be relevant for you, I would just ask and invite you to partake of it in a way that meets your needs. So when I say words like community or relationships or connection, probably different images come to mind for different people. Traditionally, probably what comes to mind for a lot of people when we talk about healing and community is probably something like these images, right? A lot of people, potentially a big group, people doing activities together. Often those activities might be verbal, right? So coming together in a therapeutic or a group space and talking about topics, probably in a space where you live and work and engage with people in a routine way, day in, day out, or week in and week out. And all of those things might be true. So you can absolutely find community like that where it's in a big group and it's verbal and it's talking and it's together live in person. That being said, community can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. So just because you may have a previous experience with a certain type of group, I would just invite you to kind of free that up a little bit and to expand beyond just the idea of physical groups that you might have seen or heard about, and to think how community can be bigger than that. So obviously throughout the pandemic, many of us have started accessing community and relationships electronically. So not being in person as we're doing today, that's becoming much more common. But community doesn't have to be in a big group. Community can be experienced one-on-one. Community can be experienced alone. Community can be experienced when you feel connected to a bigger idea or a bigger movement. Maybe you're engaging in an activity rather than talking, right? It doesn't have to be verbal. So there are groups and communities where lots of healing takes place through physical outlets, through artistic methods. It could be that you are physically alone, but you feel connected to other people who are part of a movement or engaging in similar work or activities or hobbies. So that connection and community gets built internally, just through that knowledge that you're part of something that's bigger than just yourself. The biggest thing here, I think, through all of this of kind of thinking about what community could look like or how you could build a community that looks a little different is just knowing that you're not alone. And I think especially for survivors, that piece is really critical, because so often we can be made to feel like we are alone, or like we're the only ones who have had a certain experience or been through a certain walk in your life. And the beauty of Survivor Space, of what we're trying to build here, is a space to say you're not alone. To know that even if you don't have access to in-person, verbal, big groups, all that kind of traditional view of what healing in a community might look like, there is access out there and available to other ideas of how community can look and how it can feel. Maybe you've had a negative experience in a community. You're looking to restore that or find something different and new, that maybe you can find some of that sense of connection to others moving forward, and to experience that benefit in a different way. So that being said, I think when people start thinking about the idea of seeking out community or connection, or trying to take this first step in how you would even go about finding a community around this, it can be a very personal decision. People are weighing lots of different potential pros and cons, or risks and benefits. I just sort of brainstormed a few here on the screen for you with things that I have experienced or that I've seen and experienced through folks that I've worked with, of just the idea of what might that look like? Where would I even start? What are some of the good things that could maybe come out of it? But what are some of the things that maybe hold me back from taking that first step, or things that maybe just make me pause to check in and ask, like, I'm not sure how that would go, or I'm not sure how that would feel. So for anyone who has maybe thought about seeking out community and maybe not known exactly where to start with that, my hope is that Survivor Space could potentially be a space to start that process or to open that conversation. And there's a lot of awesome research out there, and I'm just going to briefly touch on a few of what I would consider to be sort of the key ingredients, right? If you look on a label and say, the active ingredients here are these things. For me, when I think about experiencing healing in community, there are some really key ingredients that translate across lots of different research studies, across lots of different groups and experiences that I have had personally, that other people have shared with me. So we'll kind of go through this today and then have some time at the end for discussion around all of this. So first and foremost, I would say we as humans have evolved as a social species, right? And so human relationships are critically important to our mental health, our physical health. There are just volumes of research out there about the negative impacts of isolation and loneliness in physical health, in chronic illnesses, in mental health. And across these, often it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take going out and being a social butterfly and having all of this, social stuff going on. A lot of times it's just this key ingredient of being truly connected or really in relationship, or finding that sense of your community, your personal space where you can feel that social element, right? So we benefit just from being connected interpersonally in some way. Obviously, there's some really concrete, tangible things that can come out of being in community. So connecting with someone who may have been through a similar experience, may be able to share advice or tips or insight, just having lived through experience that may overlap with your own. So that sharing of tangible resources or information can be really helpful. I think a really unique part about Survivor Space is also being able to receive that information from people who have really lived it. People where you can really connect in a community to say, this isn't coming from a textbook. This isn't coming from somebody who's, preaching at me. This is coming from someone who has walked through this. And so I hold that information in a different way, and I can receive it in a different way. So it's another really key ingredient. This may sound a little bit like some psychology mumbo jumbo, but corrective experiences. So what do I mean by that? Well, like I said, you can read a lot of books. You can talk to a lot of experts. You can write a dissertation on the idea of trust or boundaries or safety, all of these kind of words. But it's one thing to know it up here. It's another thing to experience it. And especially for those of us who may have lived through a traumatic experience or a negative experience, we have learned some things in our bodies. We've learned some things through the years that we really need to experience in a new way. So I can sit and talk about, setting healthy boundaries and good communication skills. I can talk about that. I can know that that's important. It's really different when I live that out in a real life relationship or in a real life community, in a space where I can see and experience it and feel it, not just talk about it or not just read about it. So to have that experience to say, I'm going to go back and correct. I'm going to unlearn and relearn some of this stuff that is really critical to my healing, and to be able to do that with other people. Sometimes being able to do it with another person really is the only way to relearn some of this, is to actually do it, to just go out and do it, not to talk about it, not to think about it, but to experience in a healthy space, in a safe space, in a community that's open to that, to really feel that experience differently, to unlearn and to relearn. I would say altruism is another one of these kind of key ingredients that we see across lots of research studies. The idea that I can find just deep value within myself with being able to help and serve others through some of the stuff that I used to hold maybe in a dark place. Maybe I used to think, these are my broken pieces. This is my shame. This is my part that I don't share, or I don't let other people see. And when you're in a healing community with other people who are like-minded and are looking for that healing alongside, to be able to experience the benefits of coming together in kindness and in service and in seeing and experiencing that those parts of yourself can actually help others too. That there can be a way to find positive growth through that. Another kind of psychology word here, universality. What does that mean? Universality means recognizing how universal some human experiences are, recognizing that you are not alone. And this is critical, I think, for folks who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. But even expanding beyond that, every group I have ever been a part of, when people really get honest and open, really get to sharing that real stuff, people start to recognize, oh, you deal with that too. I thought I was the only one who thought that way. I thought I was the only one with those kind of thoughts or reactions to things. So breaking down that culture of secrecy and shame and isolation and really speaking your truth, seeing others people speak their truth, and just recognizing how universal. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting in a room with 10 people, or I'm sitting in an online chat circle with all these people, and everyone's kind of chiming in and saying, hey, I struggled with that too. Or, hey, I didn't know other people thought that way. I go through that too. There's been some really cool research on this idea of universals when groups come together and share. What are some of the universals that people kind of distill down to? Core fears that people have, right? So the fear of being unworthy or inadequate in some way. Every group I've ever been in that gets in this kind of sharing gets down to this core belief that, you know what, there's something about me that's not good enough, and other people are going to figure it out. So I call that imposter syndrome. Like, I think I'm walking through the world and I just, don't have it together. Everybody else around me must have their stuff together, but I don't have my stuff together. All these people out here, eventually, if I get close enough to them, if I really let them see the real me, they're going to figure out that I'm a fake, that I'm a phony, that I'm not as good as I'm cracked up to be, that I'm the imposter. I've just been like, fake it till you make it. Somehow Survivor Space asked me to come give this talk, but oh my gosh, holy moly, I hope people don't figure out that I don't know what's going on, that I don't have it together, right? So that idea that people are going to figure us out. Another one of these kind of core universal beliefs that will emerge in community healing spaces often are questions about being lovable, whether I myself am lovable, whether other people can love me, and the reverse of that, whether I am able to love other people. Like, if I really get down to it, is there just this sense that either I'm not deserving of love, or that I can never live up to some standard of how I should be able to love or care for others? People really knew how I really felt on the inside. All that dirty laundry stuff came out. There's this lovability piece there that's just never going to live up, right? So it's fascinating to see when we come together in community, when we really get vulnerable and share some of those deep, dark truths about ourselves, how universal they are to humanity. And time again, research studies will kind of point to this as one of the key ingredients with healing in community. And then my last one for today is hope. Hope is incredibly powerful in healing both mental and physical health outcomes. There are studies on chronic lung conditions, on cancer treatments. It is amazing to see the benefit that just believing that you can have a positive, hopeful outlook and outcome in a situation can actually lead to better, healthier, happier outcomes. And one of the things that people worry about sometimes when they talk about trying to heal in a community like this is saying, well, I don't want to dwell on all that stuff from the past. Well, this is a group that's talking about stuff from the past, and I don't want to go back there. In my experience, I would say the hope that comes out of these groups is really never focused on the past. It's very limited. Is that ever the case? It's so much more often that we see people talking about where they are now, where their vision is to be going next. And that focus on present and future really comes and shines through when you're in community with people who have been through similar experiences and who are able to shine a light to say, like, there is hope. Here's how I've come through it. Here's how you can too. So that hope is incredibly, incredibly powerful in community healing. So let me pause here to just check in. And if we're able to use some of the chat functionality now, when I say the word community, I'm curious to hear from anyone who would like to share what words come up for you. When you hear that word community, what does that bring up for you? There's no right or wrong answers here, but just what words come to mind when you think about the idea of community? What does community look like for you?
So we've got unity, togetherness, and trust, people that share something in common with me, warmth, a circle to be in, lessening of isolation, inclusion.
Yeah.
That's
That's
all
awesome.
good.
Awesome. Yeah. So maybe we're going to have a lot of overlap, but let me just pivot this question a little bit to ask. So I asked what comes up for you when you think about community. When I shift that to say healing in community, that was our title for our talk today, right? Healing in community. What does that healing element do for you? Does that bring up anything different, better, worse, or different than just thinking about community, but the idea of doing healing work in a community rather than on your own?
Healing in community brings up fear of exposing myself.
Yeah, that's real.
More active, more goal-oriented, another step up from simply surviving.
Mm-hmm. So I love seeing those two answers side by side because it kind of goes back to one of the earlier slides. I was thinking of the pros and the cons, or the risks and the benefits. So there's a very real and justifiable, no question, that question, that fear of, is this going to expose me in a way that I'm not ready for, or that's not safe? Are there parts of this that are not going to work for me because of my situation, where I'm at? And then right alongside that, also that piece of the hope and the vision for how this can kind of move to another level in terms of healing and all that could offer, right?
And someone else shared, healing brings up accepting and taking responsibility of my story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so beautiful when people can come together in a community, when it's safe, when people are ready, and that everyone can own just that piece, right? That I own my story. Becky, you own your story. Each of you out there watching and joining us today, you each own your story. It's yours. And you have so much power to choose how, when, why, where, all the pieces of how that story is yours to use or to share or not to share in any ways that are right for you as part of that healing.
And someone shared, healing equals sharing.
And so for many people, that is very much a part of their journey, is that sharing becomes a way of healing for them. For people who may still have concerns about that, may feel that for whatever reasons that they're not in a space for sharing in a public way, I love the idea that there are, just like this group, anonymous private spaces to connect without having to disclose, if that makes sense. So to be able to find community and connection and find healing, but in a way that's safe. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions here about this idea of community, or this idea of healing in community, and what this could mean for you or for other people? We can come back if need be. Let's see if I can advance. There we go. So maybe extending that conversation a little bit. What do you feel like you might be able to gain at this point in your journey? And we may have people at very different points in their journeys, but the idea of taking that first step towards building community or expanding community, maybe initiating into a new community that you're not a part of yet. What do you feel like you could gain from that right now with where you're at?
Someone shared the idea of sharing stories is very appealing. Another person said appealing.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. What do you feel like you need or want to be able to achieve that? Whatever those pieces are of community that you would like to access, what do you need to be able to do that right now with where you're at?
Someone shared I could gain a change in the meaning I have placed on the word community. And someone shared friends.
Yeah. They're awesome responses. Are there ways that Survivor Space might be able to meet pieces of these needs? Or as you think about community and what you need and want from it right now, obviously we're just getting started. This is our first Survivor Circle. What comes to mind for you when you think about what Survivor Space could offer to you or others in the community that could be helpful?
And Sarah, prior to you asking that, a couple of folks shared filling in the empty spaces around me I created to protect myself, filling in the spaces with safe people. Yeah. And another person shared, I want to feel accepted and not judged by others and a safe place to heal.
Yeah.
And trust, another response.
Absolutely. And that's key, right? If we go back to that idea of corrective experiences, we need to be sure that we have safe spaces, trusting people to be with before we start trying to have a corrective experience and then go down the road of having another negative experience. So all of those are really key ingredients to make sure that we're filling in with the right people, that we're connecting with the right spaces that are safe, for sure.
Yeah.
Just open it up to any other questions or discussion that might be helpful for us today around this idea of healing and community. Thoughts that come to mind for you or pieces that you might like for us to discuss as a group or for me to respond to, anything that's come up from the presentation, just anything at all.
Someone shared making sure that there are professionals available in case I am triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And while others are, thinking and perhaps typing a response or a question, Sarah, in your practice as a clinician, do you feel that community is a vital component for the survivors that you work with?
I would say absolutely. Um, I'm not one to ever say always or never, but I don't think that I have ever worked with someone who has been through an experience like this, who doesn't come in somehow believing that they are very much alone, that what was done to them is somehow unique or different, or that it doesn't, that they did not know that there were other people out there who have had these similar experiences. So when people start to realize and recognize how many other people out there are walking through similar experiences, it's very powerful. And I think a huge part of the abuse that happens to children is done in ways to intentionally and to weaponize that idea, right? To have people believing intentionally that they won't be believed, or that what's happening to them is normal, or so many of the different grooming strategies that are used to isolate, to shame, to hold things in secret. And so as those walls start getting broken down, whether that's in therapy or in other therapeutic spaces or other community healing spaces, again, therapy is not sort of the be all end all, but certainly it's where my experience lies. I think that idea that there's community out there and that you're not alone is probably the number one piece of this for me.
We had a comment and a couple of questions. Someone commented, community can help me to feel like I'm not crazy and didn't make the stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And then a question that we had, what do you feel is the basis for a healing community space?
I think the basis has got to be safety, trust. I think that the basis has to be a foundation where everyone shares equal power. So much of this dynamic of abuse and the way that it plays out in our lives over the years involves this power imbalance, right? That someone had power over us and that we have somehow lost our power as a result of what was done to us. So that idea of flipping that sideways and saying everyone in this space is equal. Everyone in this space shares power with each other, and we have greater power when we share power together than when we try to wield it over someone. Mm-hmm. That's very fundamental to the way that I do my therapy work, whether it's individual or in group settings. And I think it's critical for folks who have experienced this type of abuse.
Yeah. And someone commented, yes, power imbalance.
Yeah.
Another question that came in, do you think a community can change our meaning of victimization?
Yes. I can think of a lot of examples. The first one that comes to mind is probably that idea of power, is of reclaiming our power. And the idea that in community, there's a shift from saying, these are the ways that I was victimized, to saying, these are my sources of strength and power. And to come with that strengths-based lens of how am I going to leverage these strengths and powers that I have now for good, whether that's in my own life or in others' lives, or in the movement, or in my own professional or personal interests, but just to reclaim that sense of autonomy, of being in charge of my life, and of being able to make empowered choices in whatever area that ends up being for you.
Mm-hmm. Another question that came in, how can a community help a person who has trauma of being in groups from past experiences?
Great question, right? And this is something that comes up a lot. It's where we started the presentation, right? This idea of what does community look like? And the idea for me that community is not a cookie cutter, right? We can't just like stamp it out and say like community, this is what it looks like. Building community is very personal. So what feels safe for one person may not feel safe for another. What feels beneficial to someone may not feel beneficial to another. And I think that's, for me, when I was invited to join in with Survivor Space, that was one of the things that I really loved and got excited about was the idea that this is a very unique space. This is a space where people can connect directly to one another, directly to resources and different supports that are available, but to be able to do that in ways that are anonymous, to be able to do that in ways that are from the safety of your own space, your own home, your own laptop, or your own device. So for me, I get really excited that idea of how can we use the technology piece to bridge the gap, to say, hey, you may not be ready to be in a huge social setting in a traditional community of healing with lots of people and lots of verbal demands and lots of social demands. There's lots of people who are not ready for that. There's frankly lots of people who don't need to ever be ready for that. That may just not be the space for you. So, as I said at the beginning, right, some of us are internal processors, some of us are external processors. Some of us need to feel that connection, but need to feel it in a smaller setting or a one-on-one, or as I said, in a space where you're alone, but where you can still feel connected to the idea of community or to the knowledge that these people are out there. They just may not be sitting in the room with you.
Yeah. And another question, do you think there are several levels of healing, and should there be different communities based on the person's level?
Yes. I might pivot that a little to reframe and say maybe layers instead of levels. And so, and whoever's entering this, please feel free to come back and forth. This should be a conversation, but the way that I'm thinking about it is not that we build like, oh, I'm level 1, you're level 2, I've got to get to your level. To me, that takes us back to this power imbalance that just doesn't ever feel exactly right for me. But when I think about healing, I absolutely think about layers, like an onion, right? So we're peeling back layers. And as we do that, we start to expose new and different things. And then we peel back some of those layers. And so for me, it's much more circular and much less hierarchy, like we're building up this way. It's saying, how do we, and I've been in groups before where we kind of peel back a layer and then come back around to talking about the exact same topic we've maybe talked about in earlier sessions, but someone's in a different space, so they receive it in a different way. So it's not that they've kind of leveled up, but it's like they're on a new layer now. They're kind of they're absorbing that information in a new light. Like when I think about watching like just really classic movies that you can go watch, you know, time after time, or books that you can read and reread 100 times. It's like every time you watch it, or a great song that you love that you listen to, what mood you're in, what developmental space you're in. You know, like I watch something now that watching it 20 years ago hit me in a completely different way, or reading something that, you know, after having kids versus before having kids, you just take different pieces of it. You kind of take what you need, and the other parts you don't realize just kind of fall to the side. But later you come back and you pick up those pieces and it just fits in a different layer. So that's kind of how I think about community healing, is that it offers that benefit. It offers that opportunity to come at different angles in different moments with different people who are all in their own layers and spaces. And it becomes this beautiful space of all those layers.
Yes, and someone commented, true, sometimes I want to talk about erupting memories. Sometimes I want to talk about processing anger. Can be changing depending on the day. Another comment, love the idea of being on, quote, a new level and seeing it in a new way. Mm-hmm. We had an additional question. Do you think community can work with all genders in the same group?
I think that's probably similar to some of my earlier answers, is that it depends. So there may be a person who, based on where they are in their journey, they're really looking for a very specific community type. So as a woman, I might say right now I'm in a space where I need the community of women around this topic or this issue. That's not to say that in the future I might not benefit from different constellations of groups, whether that's the same gender or different gender, whatever, right? But that's very personal. And so people, I think, kind of have to take a moment to look at their own situation and say, what is it that I need? And if being in a group with different types of people, and I would say this could apply to lots of different demographics as well, that if that's not the space you're in, give yourself some grace to figure out what you need and access that. And then again, with the layers, like in a different time, in a different space, you may need a different layer at that point.
Great. Well, I know we just have a few more minutes. Someone commented and said we need to be responsible to voice our needs.
And that can be hard, especially when we've been taught to not voice those needs, to stuff those needs away somewhere. That's part of the healing journey. So really giving yourself some grace when you find that that's hard. We would expect that to be hard.
Absolutely. It just now occurred to me, Sarah, I could probably stop sharing your PowerPoint so people could see you better. Oh, and to the point that you made and others have made, a comment of brilliance. Indeed.
Any other thoughts or questions about this topic, or if there's anything else? I mean, we've got a couple minutes before we need to wrap up, but anything else that is kind of bubbling up for folks, or just thoughts or comments or anything? A comment, this has been incredible. Thank you.
And I will tell those of you who would like to kind of continue the conversation through chat, the chat window on the Survivor Circles page on Survivor Space will be up through the rest of today. So if you want to continue the conversation in that format, you can, and it will appear on that screen. Someone says, good stuff, and thank you for your time and expertise.
Thank you, guys. This has been a great way to kick off the Survivor Circles. Becky, I'm assuming that I can also log into that chat once I get out of this window. So if people are posting comments and stuff for the next, however many hours or however long, I'll hop on there and I can respond in real time on there as well.
Yes, and that's a great point. You can do that, but just so folks know that, Sarah's obviously not going to be available throughout the remainder of the day. So just know that, she may not be able to respond to a specific question that you ask in the chat, but please feel free to continue the conversation there if you would like. Also keep an eye on the Survivor Circles page for future sessions that are coming up. With this feature being new, we're going to repeat some of our sessions to hopefully catch people who are learning about the site, who want to, see and learn about a particular topic that may have missed it previously. So you will see that we will be repeating some of our sessions, but feel free to keep checking the page. We'll be adding more sessions in different kinds over time. So thank you all so much for joining us. Sarah, thank you so much for being our brave first person to do this. We really appreciate all that you've done for Survivor Space, but definitely today.
Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. It was great to be a part of it.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye.